Hello, this is Justin Williams with the Wolfpacker Podcast. I'm joined today by a special guest, NC State beat writer from the News and Observer, Jonas Pope. But before we get too far into this episode, this podcast is brought to you in part by JFQ Lending. With interest rates below 3%, there has never been a better time to lock in a low fixed interest rate on your mortgage. You'll never need to think about refinancing again. Set it and forget it. And with JFQ Lending, you are guaranteed to get the highest level of customer service. They have an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau and over 3,000 5-star reviews. Give Hunter Clausen a call today at 480-513-3992 or email Hunter directly at hclausen@jfqlending.com. That's HCLAUSSEN at jfqlending.com. JFQ Lending, Inc., Equal Access Lender, licensed in over 40 states, www.jfqlending.com. While you're at it, head over to thewolfpacker.com and use promo code PACK60. That's promo code PACK60 for a free 60-day trial on all of our premium content, news, and analysis. We're going to be talking about basketball here today, but we just had National Signing Day. There's still a bowl game to come up for in football, and maybe we'll touch on a couple of those things here towards the end with Jonas. But all the more reason we're going to have plenty of premium content here through the rest of the year and going into 2021. So please be sure to use that promo code PACK60 on thewolfpacker.com. So no Matt Carter today for the listeners at home. He's on dad duty. And I think that's a good segue to introduce our guest, Jonas. We haven't had him on since he first got on to the NC State beat at the News and Observer this summer. We were one of his first stops after taking the new gig, and he's actually he's going to have to get ready for dad duty coming up in a month, man. It's your wife's expecting in January, right?
Yeah, January 22nd. It's
you're in the final
approaching. I'm in the
final countdown. Yeah, final countdown. You're a month in, so yeah. That's going to be assuming basketball is still going on, you're going to have your hands full, man. But
I will not, because I get some paternal leave. So paternal leave, I will not have my hands that full. So you guys you may see me cover a few more games this January. I might dip out for a while and then pop right back up around tournament time. So I'm gonna be very strategic in the way I place my return. So I might pop up around March, right in time for the ACC tournament.
Just in time for the best time of the year, the ACC tournament and March Madness. That's a smart man right there. Well, I'm glad we're getting you on the pod then, because it sounds like we're getting you just in time before you take a little hiatus and take care of your wife and kid. But anyways, let's talk about that game last night. NC State drops their first game of the season, a 80-69 road loss to St. Louis. First time we saw the Wolfpack in action in 2 weeks. They hadn't played since December 3rd against UMass Lowell. I keep pronouncing that wrong. Somebody corrected me on Twitter. I forget what the correct pronunciation is, but either way, they're from Massachusetts and not a very good team. NC State took care of business against them and its first two opponents, and then, had some big non-conference games, that were planned on the schedule canceled with, Michigan on the road and the Big Ten ACC Challenge, and UConn, which was supposed to happen in Bubbleville, and then even the ACC opener against Louisville, that gets postponed for Wednesday. But then on short notice, as of like this Monday, Coach Keats calls up St. Louis's head coach, and they get a ball game scheduled for this Thursday. It's, to give you any indication of how short notice this was, you could only watch it on ESPN Plus in North Carolina. Any other game like that would have been at least on ACC Network or, nationally televised. So, Jonas, just your thoughts on the pause and particularly the pause's impacts on what we saw last night. Cause, for my takeaway is there was way more good than bad last night. NC State doesn't come out on top, but they won that game for 3/4 of that game with 7 players, and their starters had to play over 34 minutes last night. And it looked like a team in those last 10 minutes that hadn't played in 2 weeks and were playing with a short rotation. So just your thoughts on the whole situation and what your expectations were last night.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for having me again. And I guess since Matt isn't here, I'm not a guest. I'm a co-host. I'm gonna call myself a co-host this week. This is just you.
I'll call you a co-host. Yeah. You're an honorary co-host. You're always an honorary co-host. You come on the show whenever you want, Jonas. So.
Yeah, I appreciate that. But yeah, obviously the pause with basketball, probably more so than any sport, man. You gotta get into a rhythm, man. not playing since December 3rd, not being able to practice until like last Saturday. And then when they practiced, they couldn't even do 5-on-5. They had to do 4-on-4 YMC pickup type games, I guess, in practice. So I don't know, considering all that and considering you were missing a combined 19 points with like DJ Funderburg and Cam Hayes. Cam Hayes, one of the top reserves. Like, I don't know if you could ask more of what this team did last night and going on the road. Like you said, not really dominating, but like asserting their authority in the first half, and right up until like that 8 or 9 minute, maybe 7 minute mark of the second half. Like you said, they were in control. And I think what you saw in that last few minutes is finally like those minutes caught up with them. That not playing basketball in 3 weeks or 2 weeks caught up with them. You know, he only took 9 guys. He only played 8. I mean, really, he only played 7 because Jalen Gibson only played like 1 minute, right. Whereas St. Louis and Travis Ford were able to throw waves and waves of reserves at NC State. I mean, that makes a difference, man, especially when you consider, like I said, they haven't played in so long, and you ask so much of those 5 starters who they left it all on the floor. You saw that, but they all played 33 plus minutes in a road game for the first time in 3 weeks. So, 2 weeks. I agree with you what you said, man. It was definitely more good than bad. I think part of the good was we saw something we had never seen before in an aggressive Manny Bates on offense. And so you're watching that in the first half, like, yo, who is this man in this number 15 jersey? But that was part of the good. And you saw them battle. They didn't back down. They knew they were shorthanded. They knew the odds were stacked against them. But, you know, they came there to win. They were not looking for a moral victory. They were not looking for any pats on the back or thanks for coming. Like they were coming to win that game. You know, Jericho Helms and Devin Daniels picked a bad time to have not their best outings. And, you know, if you have an average game from both of those guys, then maybe we're having a different story. But then again, like I said, I wouldn't hold this game against NC State. I mean, obviously in the win-loss column, it's going to go against them.
Right.
But I don't blame them for trying it. I don't blame them for scheduling this game and getting on the road and going and play and showing people that, hey, no, we're going to get, if we can get a game in these uncertain times of not knowing when we may ever get a game again, let's go ahead and play it and get on the court and get back into a flow.
Yeah, it's going to be one of those games that it's going to be really interesting to see how the selection committee treats this game in March. You know, are they going to be looking into the fact that DJ Funderburk and Cam Hayes weren't available and that NC State was playing shorthanded with a 7-man rotation? You know, those are really important circumstances. And, you know, no discount to St. Louis. To me, St. Louis looked like a team that, you know, is deserving of a fringe top 25 ranking, a very experienced team, a team that, you know, returned all 5 of its starters, returned 9 of its top 10 scores from last year. I know Craig Hamill, the SID at NC State, was making fun of you for not reading the game notes, and you took that personally, but I'm sure you knew that going into the game, Jonas. All the experience, that just the experience combined with the shorthandedness of NC State, and not to mention 4 of those 9 guys available were true freshmen. I mean, that was just never a winning combination. So to me, it was very surprising to see NC State have a 6-point lead with 11 minutes to go. But with that said, you talked about Manny Bates. I think that's a good place to go to, because he was, to me, the best positive from last night. Career high 37 minutes. So first of all, he showed, and Coach Keats talked about this after the game, that he's capable of staying on the floor without fouling. And there was so much pressure on him on the defensive end, particularly without a DJ Funderburk in there, an additional big to, you know, help be a rim protector. And DJ Funderburk's a little bit of an underrated rim protector at that. But Bates just shined last night. 20 points on the offensive end, a new career high, and then another career high with 8 blocks, 7 rebounds. I mean, it was a triple-double type of night for him, and, you know, had a couple. I mean, he had one of those blocks called for a goaltending, had, you know, maybe one more been counted, and he grabbed a couple more boards. It would have been a triple-double for him last night. So that's got to give you a lot of encouragement if you're Kevin Keats, if you're NC State, if you're an NC State fan, that, you know, in year 2 in the rotation as a starter, Manny Bates is actually going to be, you know, potentially taking a step forward on the offensive end.
You know, we both heard Coach Keats talk about it all preseason. Like whenever he met with the media, he always talked about how Manny Bates had improved offensively. Well, he talked about how much he had gained weight and put on some muscle, but also how much he had improved offensively. You know, we heard about it. And I think for the first time last night, we saw it. I mean, he was calling for the ball. He was battling for position. The offense was really running through him. They would come down and throw it inside to Manny first. And, you know, he was more than just that put back slam dunk offensive type guy. He was going over his shoulder. He was showing the drop step. He was showing his full bag, as the kids would say, last night on the offensive end. And, you know, we've always known what he could do on defense, but to block 8 shots, like you said, when you know he's the only real big man they had in the rotation last night, but he still laid it all on the line. Yeah, if you're a State fan, you can't come from this game with that being like a bright, serious bright spot. But you want to harp on the fact they should have played. Then I don't know what to tell you, because that's something moving forward that when you get DJ back, now you have a Twin Towers double scoring threat in the post, and that's something great, you know, going into ACC play.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it was quite clear that, you know, and you can't really think about this going forward, but if you had a Funderburk and you had a Cam Hayes adding an 8th and a 9th man in the rotation, I mean, there's no way that game turns into a double-digit affair in the last few minutes of that game. I mean, Keats has shown that in an ideal world, and what he's shown in the first 3 games is that he likes to keep guys rotating in and out. He likes to keep guys fresh, and he wants to maintain that press all game. Well, you know, when you're pressing for, you know, better part of 40 minutes a night, then it's very explainable why those legs start to get tired in the second half. Now, going into this game, I, you know, wrote a little scouting piece on St. Louis, and I was concerned when I was writing that piece, knowing that NC State was going to be shorthanded, knowing, you know, that there's potentially some valuable pieces that we're going to be missing, an experienced team. But one thing that I noticed in when we finally figured out what the final roster was an hour before tip-off, it was encouraging to see that the senior presence in the backcourt for NC State was available. To me, that said, okay, NC State will at least have a shot to win this game, because St. Louis already played small ball. They were a team that already, you know, went with 4 guards in the starting lineup and, you know, played a 6'7" forward as their big. So sizing and matching up in terms of, you know, missing a DJ Funderburk in that starting lineup wasn't necessarily going to be an issue. But, you know, when you only have 7 guys available, Keats talked about this a little bit after the game last night, but that standard, that expectation for everybody else on the court, I mean, you can't afford for guys like Devin Daniels or Jericho Helms to not have their best game. I thought Braxton Beverly played, you know, pretty average to above average game. Didn't necessarily click in the first half. You know, he didn't really have any. He only had 2 shot attempts in the first half. Don't know if it was a matter of, you know, him just not being confident in putting up shots, or he looked to me like he was spreading the floor pretty well. The ball just didn't find his hands. And then he caught a little bit of fire in the second half there. But, you know, Devin Daniels finishes with 15 points, not his best shooting night, and 0 for 6 from 3. And, you know, I think that's kind of one of the big stories. And when you look at this split box from last night, you know, NC State shot, I think, above 40% in each of those first 3 games. They're shooting lights out. And it was something that makes you step back and think, oh, is this NC State team going to be a better perimeter shooting team this year than they have been in years past? But last night, 4 of 18 from 3, 22.2% from the perimeter. And when you're playing a St. Louis team that ranks in the top 10 in both field goal percentage and 3-point field goal percentage in the country, you got to have those shots go in. So, I mean, did you think it was just maybe rust, shots weren't going in, better defense with the opponent? I mean, sometimes it's just not your night, right?
Yeah, I mean, rust, I think, definitely played a part in it. You got to get back in that rhythm, and yeah, sometimes the ball's just not going to see the bottom of the net. And I think some of those shots that Devin Daniels took and maybe Jericho took was pressing a little bit. You know, I asked Keats last night, were they trying to press and make up for the guys who weren't there? I mean, he gave an answer I would expect the coach to give when talking about his guys. But I still think they were trying to compensate for the guys who were missing. And yeah, you just can't afford to have your top 2 guys. They picked a bad night to have a bad game. And some of those shots were questionable, but a lot of those shots were, like you said, it's just, you got to get your legs up under you. You got to play some games. Like, it wouldn't surprise me if those shots fail at a higher click on Saturday, because now they've gotten the bad shots out the way. They got their legs up under them. They kind of get their rhythm going. Like you said, Braxton, he didn't get going until the second half. Imagine if he was a little bit more aggressive in the first half. Then again, we might be having a different conversation this morning. I'm still waiting on Thomas Allen to get going. You know, I know he can score the ball a lot, and I know he had 2 surgeries, and he's probably still trying to find his rhythm as well. But he's another guy. Once he finds it, he can definitely contribute on the offensive end. But yeah, I mean, sometimes you have bad nights, and when you haven't played a game since December 3rd, I think we can all overlook the fact that the shots weren't falling.
Oh, no doubt. I don't. This isn't a game to me where it's time to get angry about this NC State team.
Right.
Now, talk to me in a couple of weeks if they get everybody back and, you know, they start to get in a rhythm and then, you know, play like this again.
Yeah.
And then there's reason for criticism. But to me, just when you take a step back and you look at the context of the situation, like, we should all just be happy that there was basketball played last night.
Right.
But you know, one other thing that was pretty glaring last night, and part of this is because DJ Funderburk wasn't in the lineup, you're missing a, you know, 6'10" big. Part of this was getting tired a little bit, but that's not really the best excuse because St. Louis really controlled the boards all night. Ended up out rebounding the Wolfpack, I think, 53-26. Now, St. Louis was a good team in terms of rebounding margin entering this game. I think they were top 40 in the country. They averaged about 9 more boards per game than their opponent. Now, they had played a pretty light schedule going into that, but particularly on the offensive boards, they're a really efficient team. I think they went into that game, you know, with like a 35 or 40% rebounding percentage, meaning they grabbed 35 to 40% of offensive rebounding opportunities, which is incredible.
Yep.
And that was, again, the case last night. So, you know, what do you think needs to change in terms of NC State's attack on the boards? Do the guards need to get more involved? I mean, Manny had a great first half with the shot blocks and on offense, but you would have liked to see him get a little bit more involved on the boards. He had 2 boards going into halftime. Stepped it up in the second half, though. But seemed like other than him and Helms, nobody was really getting active on the boards. What needs to change there, Jonas?
Well, first of all, despite what Craig said, I did read in the notes that St. Louis was an above average rebounding team. So I was not surprised that they attacked the boards the way they did. So that's their calling card. So that plays a part in it too. So I wouldn't say there's a whole lot State needs to do differently other than get DJ back. But you just played a team that's part of their identity is crashing the board. So it didn't surprise me that they out rebounded State with just Manny Bates in there. But yeah, so maybe Devin Daniels at 6'7" maybe needs to, you know, creep in there a little bit more and try to attack the boards. Like I said, Jericho, he's a pretty aggressive rebounder. But I mean, that was just a team that those guys did the little thing, and that's what they cared about. St. Louis, I'm talking about. They cared about boxing out and crashing the boards and sending everybody to the boards on the offensive end. So, I mean, that's not something I would worry too much about as far as for NC State. I mean, obviously, you don't want to get out rebounded at 53-26 or whatever it was. But again, your second tallest player on the roster wasn't there. He was not there at all. You know, Sebron is a guy who didn't play as many minutes as they thought he would. You know, he's a guy who Keats likes, can get in there and grab some boards. He said the game was too fast for Jalen Gibson. He only played 1 minute. He's another 6'9", 6'10" guy who can help on the boards. That wouldn't be my main concern right now. Like I said, you get a 6'10" guy back whenever DJ returns, but you just played a team that is really, really good at rebounding. That's just their calling card. Would not be my biggest concern moving forward for NC State.
Well, at least in the next few days, it might come up again because there's a pretty good rebounding team coming to Raleigh on Tuesday in North Carolina for the ACC opener. And, fingers crossed that you could get a DJ Funderburk back. I mean, I asked Keats earlier this week if there was any potential timeline on getting the missing scholarship players back after this game. And, you know, he kind of punted on the question and said it's up to the medical people. And of course they're going to listen to their medical people. I would expect nothing less from the program. But with that said, you know, you just have to think just based on the timelines of everything, maybe they can get, you know, a couple of these guys back before that ACC opener, but they'll certainly have to rebound better against a Carolina team that has a incredible front court this year. So that'd be one thing to watch. But then on the other hand, you know, one thing that NC State's been doing very well all season is they're forcing turnovers. Again, they forced an experienced St. Louis team with an experienced backcourt 21 turnovers last night, and they scored 18 points off of those turnovers. That was another really positive for NC State last night, something that could bode well for them, in the Carolina game against that young backcourt that the Tar Heels have. But, they looked really engaged on defense in that first half, and that's why I think they led for most of that game, because it seems to me that those 30 minutes that they were leading, they were controlling the pace. They were controlling the way they wanted that game to be played. It was a pretty ugly offensive first half, but that was advantage NC State, because they wanted to press, they wanted to force turnovers, they wanted to play their ball game, and I think there's a lot to be said about that. So I guess last thoughts on that, on this game, before we talk about what's ahead for the Wolfpack.
Yeah, again, St. Louis is a very good team. It's not like they went on the road and lost to an O and whatever team. They really laid on the line that first half, and they showed you, like, even with 7 guys for 30-some minutes, they really battled. They can battle with really good teams. So you can only imagine how they're going to look, with their full roster. With that being said, through 4 games, like I still don't think we know the true identity of this team, because their first 3 games are all blowouts. So you're not going to learn a lot about your team when you're winning by 20 most of the game. And then they played last night with just 8 guys. So I think we won't find out who this team is, who they really are, until ACC play.
And that's a good point, because we were thinking 2 weeks ago, NC State looks good against these lesser sub 300 KenPom teams in the first 3 games. Let's see what they can do against UConn. Let's see what they can do against Michigan. We thought, okay, we're finally going to get to know what this NC State team is. And then, of course, there's the pause. Fingers crossed everybody's safe and healthy. And, of course, we wish the best to everyone that's potentially impacted by the virus. But then that, shuts down things for 2 weeks. And then finally you get a good, competitive game against a team that I think is going to be a top 7 or 8 seed in the NCAA tournament. An experienced team, and you just play them shorthanded. You don't get to, you still don't get to find out what this team is about. So I personally think that they've got some really good pieces. I personally think that when they have a full roster and they're playing their game, to me, this can be a tournament team, and a tournament team that, maybe doesn't even have to, hold their breath until the end of Selection Sunday and have to potentially play first 4, but that would require a full healthy roster. And that would require, the continued, play of the freshmen like Cam Hayes when he gets back in the lineup. And one guy we need to bring up, freshman Shaquille Moore, man, he was on one on defense last night. To me, he was the real spark plug off the bench, and you got to be excited about him as an NC State fan. Once that offensive game gets going, he's going to be, a top 5 guard in this league, in my opinion. What do you think of Moore last night?
I think we saw kind of what we expected from him when he signed, and we knew he would be that kind of defender, a guy who can just get after people and dog them for 94 feet. And that's what he did. And like you said, when the offense comes around, he'll be one of the top guys in the ACC. But for right now, he's accepted his role of coming in, playing a few minutes, and just being a super aggressive on defense. And that's a great sign for a young guy.
Well, we'll see what's up next for the Wolfpack. They got Campbell on Saturday. Hopefully a get right game for the Wolfpack, and
hopefully a game that gets played. Period.
Yeah, true. That has there been any problems with Campbell to your knowledge, Jonas? Or
not to my knowledge, but I'm saying in this year 2020, the way things have gone, I'm going to knock on wood before every game. Hopefully a game gets played. Period.
Honestly, a great point. You get weathered when you finally get basketball back on. It's like, okay, yeah, I know COVID's going on, but basketball's on my TV screen, right? Everything's going to keep going as planned. And then, of course, the news eventually breaks. So you're exactly right, man. Fingers crossed that these games, keep being played. Everybody stays safe and healthy. But while we have you, because, Carolina's the next big game coming up. We don't really know what to expect. Hopefully NC State will have its full roster. Hopefully we'll get a better idea what this Wolfpack team is. But while we have you, let's talk about football really quickly. We had National Signing Day this week, and, NC State, to me, it's not going to be a top 10 or 15 class in the country, but to me, is a really smart class. Is a class that, there's a lot of high-end 3-star type of guys that you put them in a program with Coach Thunder, give them a couple years, 3 years to develop. You never know which of these guys are going to develop into future pros. And I know you were asking about, a guy like Zion Reeves, a 6'7", 260 defensive end from North Carolina. And I'm sure you're probably writing a story on him. But, really intriguing guy that was, first year football player, but it's got a stellar frame, a guy that, you never know what can happen once he gets into the program and what he can turn out to be. But what was your impression of this class that Dave Doran put together now and going into his 9th year with the program, and just what to expect with the future of this program after yet another good regular season for Dave Doran that makes 3 of the last 4 years with 8 wins in the regular season?
Can you tell? You could tell that Zion Reeves was my favorite player out of this entire class. Was it that obvious?
Well, based on the fact that you only asked about him, Jonas, I know you've always got questions, man. So I was like, that's the thing about being in the media. You can tell like who's going to write what when they ask those questions. But
yeah, no, that's my favorite. He's my favorite prospect out of this whole class. I think, obviously Carolina's class is getting a lot of attention for bringing in so many 5-stars and 4-stars and all these in-state guys. But I think low key, under the radar that Dave Doran and his staff put together a solid class. Like, it's not a class that's going to pop off the rankings and jump off the page with their stars and the big names. But man, it's solid. Like, when you go up and down this roster, I mean, this group, like, it's a solid group, and it's like the perfect NC State type of recruits. Like, it's guys who will come in, like, most of them are probably red shirt. Like, you might have a couple who will play right away, but in 2 or 3 years, they'll be household names and on all these NFL draft boards. Like you said, the staff, they bring guys in who fits what they want to do, and then they put them with Coach Thunder, and in a couple of years, they're stars. Like, that's when they're that kind of star, not a 4 or 5 star. They are stars on the field right. 3 or 4 years later. I mean, they just fit the blueprint perfectly of what he wants to do there at NC State.
And to me, it seems like the perfect time to have a class like that. You don't need a lot of, because a lot of these guys are coming back next year. I mean, I know Aleem McNeil's going to be gone, but you get the FSU transfer, who's, another potential all ACC type of talent to, replace Aleem's role at nose tackle. You've got some transfers in the secondary. I mean, and a lot of returning talent. We'll see what guys like Emeka Emezi or Kerry Angeline or Joe Skolthorpe are going to do. But, to me, this NC State team has a lot to be excited about in 2021 with the returning talent. And yeah, it's just a good complete class. A funny story. Before we sign off here about Zion Reeves, the first time I met him was like at the Tom Lemming, high school event at Cardinal Gibbons. And man, when you say he's 6'7", like that is a true 6'7". Yeah. Like
not a roster, not a football roster 6'7". No, like a real 6'7".
No. Like for instance, I talked to Jalen Gibson's coach when he committed to NC State this summer after to replace Josh Hall's scholarship, and he was like, "I'm telling you, Justin, Jalen Gibson is a true 6'11". Like, this is a perennial 7-footer. He's listed at 6'9" on the roster. But Zion Reeves, like he could be 6'8". Like, I'm standing next to this guy. I'm a tall guy. I'm a tall guy. This man made me feel short, like really short, and not many guys can do that. So, and he's got these big bare hands too. I shook his hand before coronavirus, before it was a thing to shake hands. And man, he's a guy that you got to be excited about his frame. So, and Trevally Price, a really interesting potential talent to go along with him as an edge rusher. But yeah, so bowl season sounds like it's looking like Jacksonville, Jonas.
Yeah, I mean, everybody's kind of been hush about it, but it's looking like Jacksonville, dark horse, Charlotte. But in my mind, I'm already thinking Jacksonville. So yeah, it'll actually be my second trip to Jacksonville in the last 3 years. I guess the last time they were in Jacksonville, I went. So I'm familiar, so that helps. I'm looking forward to a return to Jacksonville. That's where they are headed for sure.
And let's hope it goes better than the last time you went to Jacksonville. Because
that was not good.
Well, I mean, at least NC State, fingers crossed, sounds like it should have better part of its full roster. I mean, it sounds like one of the few teams in the ACC that's actually excited about playing a bowl. You know, you look at all these ACC teams canceling, saying, "Nah, we're good. We're going to go home for the holidays. We're throwing in the towel." And no, it seems like NC State's excited to play. We'll see if Aleem McNeil plays. I know, you know, he said that he was leaning towards playing, but I don't think he made a full decision yet. And, you know, whatever he decides, I think is the best decision for him. But we'd love to see him in a Wolfpack uniform one last time and against a good SEC opponent, maybe a Mississippi or an Auburn, you know, Missouri. We'll see. Yeah. But anyways, Jonas, thank you for joining us this morning. Thanks for talking some hoops and some football, and you know, best of luck next January to you and your family. So guys, go follow him on Twitter. It's at JEPope IV, JE Pope IV on Twitter. You can follow us at the Wolfpacker, and you can follow me personally at Justin H. Will. Please be sure to use that promo code PACK60 on the wolfpacker.com for a free 60-day trial. Please be sure to rate, subscribe, and review this podcast wherever you listen to us. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play. Like us on Facebook, NC State Wolfpack on the wolfpacker.com. And stay safe. Week away from Christmas, more Pack basketball, bowl game coming up. So lots of action coming up here. And for Jonas Pope, this is Justin Williams, and this has been the Wolfpacker Podcast.